I live in Branson, Missouri, and not far from my house is an abandoned theme park called Celebration City. It's been abandoned for over a decade now, having closed in 2008. It was themed after America in the 20th century. It was opened in the afternoon into the evening, with each operating day closing out with a laser and fireworks display. The park featured many rides, shows, and attractions, and its operating season ran from May until mid-September. I had been there several times with my family as a kid, and when it closed down, we were all definitely saddened to hear. They tore down most, if not all, of the roller coasters before closing, but even still, to this day, most of the buildings still stand, and it's a little known fact that it's kind of a very cool place to explore now, low-key. My friend, who I'll call Calvin, was very on board with my idea of going to check it out. I asked him because he's a family friend, and our families had been to the park together in the past. We drove over and parked in the Steak and Shake parking lot across the street, since the parking lot to the theme park had obviously been closed off for a very long time. It was around 7 p.m., the sun was setting. We didn't want to go in broad daylight in fear of getting caught or running into other people. We brought a couple heavy-duty flashlights for when it would get dark. In the meantime, we could see just fine at first. We jogged across the street when no one was looking, as we didn't want to be obvious about trespassing in the park. When no cars were coming, we cut into the grass and into the trees surrounding the property of the park. It was surprisingly easy to sneak into the park. In fact, it didn't even really feel like we were sneaking in at all. Not that I'm encouraging anyone to trespass. Seeing all the old buildings and attractions I remembered from when I was a kid still standing in this now cold and empty setting was so eerie. It's like a part of my childhood was dead. One thing was for sure though, we were the only people in this place. No other sounds but the crickets. We couldn't even hear the traffic from outside. As we walked around, we realized so much was left behind. It was clear that people had been here since it closed because of writings and occasional graffiti on the wall, but lots of props and such were still in place or behind the glass in buildings. Some of the buildings had broken glass though, indicating people had broken in and explored some of them. As it got darker, we decided to crawl in through one of these windows to one of the buildings. Once inside, we realized it was the diner once called Last Chance Diner. It was dark inside and admittedly creepy. The front door was closed, locked, and covered. There were oddly planks of wood and I guess other random debris and objects laying all around the dining space. The best I could describe it, it seemed like it was being used for storage. Like things from outside were brought into there. Calvin was checking out the other side of the place. I yelled to him I'm checking out the bathroom. Then I proceeded to one of the bathrooms. There was a different smell in here, not possible to explain, but there were 3 stalls in here, and as soon as I got in there was a sound from one of them, like something really small being dropped to the floor. I said, "Hello?" I had my flashlight on in this pitch black room. All 3 stall doors were closed, but something made a noise in there. I held the bathroom door open with my foot, then got on my knees, and aimed the flashlight below one of the stalls, and I saw a pair of shoes and legs. I gasped and jumped, then looked under the other 2 stalls, and there was the same thing. There were 3 pairs of shoes and legs visible under the stall doors, and one of them began to move as if they were getting down on their knees to look under the stall door, but I didn't stick around long enough to see their face. I was already out of the bathroom yelling for Calvin to leave. I climbed back out through the window, and he followed me, not asking questions till we were out and away from that building. I told him about the 3 people in the stalls. He made a joke that they were taking a shit, but I knew that meant he didn't entirely believe me. I told him one of them was about to look under the stall. When I tried to explain the bizarre sight better to him, his expression changed to a more freaked out look. We clearly weren't alone there, and if those were just 3 friendly people also there exploring but just using the bathroom, I feel like they would have said something as I came in, or definitely after I said hello in there. By the time we were out of the park and back to the car, it was pretty much pitch black out. We haven't returned there since. I don't have an explanation for what I saw. It was scary and weird, and definitely switched the mood of what was otherwise a fun day. I'm a 30-year-old woman living alone in a mid to lower income area. There's some crime in my town, but I don't live in a ghetto. Still, sometimes I do feel a little uncomfortable. I don't know a lot of my neighbors too well, other than my next door neighbors, who are both nice. The houses across the street are a different story. I like knowing my neighbors because it makes me feel a little safer living alone. I'm a big scaredy cat, so my biggest fears of living alone came true when one night I was in bed trying to fall asleep. It was pretty late on a work night, past 11. I heard the leaves slightly crunching on the side of the house. Human or not, I couldn't tell. There are a lot of cats and raccoons walking around here at night. The following night, I was awoken to something outside my window, like a singular crack or tap. It must have been the window frame. It was October, so I still had the windows open for air. So I guess out of pure instincts, I said, "Who's there?" I didn't hear anything after that. I got up and lifted my blind, and no one was outside. 2 nights in a row of this, I was starting to think I was getting paranoid over the smallest things, like regular house noises. So I tried to fall back asleep, but that same night, I woke up again. This time to some scratching or scraping sound from the backyard. I heard it through the window. I got up from my bed and went out to the little living space by the back door. I heard the clicking louder now. It was right outside the sliding door. I turned on the light in the living space, and then the sound stopped. I went over to the sliding door, which is covered by a sliding curtain. I was so scared to pull it, expecting to see someone, but when I yanked it open like a band-aid, no one was there. I flicked on the backyard light and slid open the door. I was relieved to see no one out there, including raccoons or some other pests. I listened to the crickets for a minute, then heard something in my tiny yard. Something rustling in the bush. I looked at the bushes. They're too thick to really see anything, but they're definitely a good place for someone to hide. And if that sound wasn't a raccoon or possum, I didn't want to know what it was. I went back inside. I made sure everything was locked. I went back to my room and even locked my bedroom door. After about 10 minutes of laying in my bed, there was a knock at my front door this time. I was starting to freak out now. I ignored it and stayed in my bed. No one should be knocking this late at night. If it happened again, I'd call 911. It didn't happen again. I somehow fell asleep eventually after that. The next day, I went straight to Best Buy with my brother, and he helped me pick out a doorbell camera and a security camera set. He helped me install both of them, the doorbell camera in the front and the other cameras in the back, both in low-key spots. My brother also spent the night that night to make me feel better. He slept in the guest bedroom. We were both in our own beds trying to sleep when I got an alert on my phone, motion detected on my property. I opened the Ring app and I screamed because there was someone in the black and white video trying to pick the lock to the back door of my house. I woke up my brother and showed him the video, and he burst out of the bed and without shoes or socks on, ran out into the backyard ready to kill someone, but my scream chased the person away, which we saw while playing the video back. My brother screamed outside my yard to never come back as loud as he could, and undoubtedly, the person trying to break in heard it. We couldn't identify the man's face. He had a hood over his head and was wearing all dark clothing, but not in a single frame could we see his face. He was also wearing gloves, which meant he left no fingerprints. We called the police, even knowing there wasn't much they could do. It just felt like we needed to have them come to keep a lookout. After that night, nothing similar ever happened again. Not to toot my own horn, but I am on the more attractive side, and what really scares me is the possibility that this was someone who knew who I am, a young single woman living alone in a house. It makes me wonder if it's possible that this was someone who lives on my street, one of my neighbors. I guess I'll never know. When my mom and dad divorced, my mom got 2 of the 5 houses that my dad owned. My dad owns a very successful real estate company, so we have or had places basically everywhere. I'm 23 years old, so I really just stay wherever I want, but I usually stay at one of my mom's houses now because I'm closer with her. This was one of the many weeks that my mom was at our beach house, and I was alone at the main house. I'm used to having the house to myself more often than not. The setup in the main house is a kitchen, living room, and 2 bedrooms upstairs, and then the same thing on the first floor, and then a basement. My bedroom is in the upstairs. I mainly use the kitchen and living room up there too, while my mom uses the downstairs for herself. It's a nice setup. The house has 3 entrances, a front, back, and a side entrance. The side entrance leads out to where all the garbage cans and such are. I usually go out that door when taking out the trash. Anyway, the story really begins when I started noticing a lot of my clothes were missing. I'd call my mom anytime this happened if she wasn't home, and asked if she'd moved anything out of my clothing baskets. Usually she'd say no, since we live in separate floors of the house. But even this couple of weeks that I was home alone, an extended period of time, I was noticing some of my favorite shirts were missing. My room is usually pretty messy, admittedly, but even after digging through everything, I couldn't find a bunch of specific pieces of clothing. It made no sense. I even resorted to checking my car and the downstairs in my mom's room. Nothing. I came up with the idea that maybe one of my friends or multiple friends took my clothes for whatever reason, or more realistically that they'd eventually just come up on their own, and I just left it at that. When I'm alone, I sleep with the door cracked open just so I could hear if, God forbid, someone were trying to break in. I was watching a movie on my laptop when my bedroom door suddenly shut. It didn't slam, but it didn't exactly close softly either. I had the ceiling fan on and both windows, so I thought maybe it was a draft. It does sometimes happen. But then I heard something from outside my bedroom down in the hall. My reaction isn't exactly what most people would do while home alone. I got out of bed and ran to the door and opened it. The hallway light was off. I turned it on, then walked towards the living room, and there was no one sitting on the couch or anything nightmarish like that. I wasn't satisfied yet, though. I went downstairs to my mom's floor and looked around, in her rooms, kitchen, and living room. But then I noticed the basement door ajar. The light switch for the basement is right atop the stairs. It's a string you pull down. I went down into the basement, the relatively unused basement. There's just a couch, TV, a few workout machines, and a small room with a punching bag down there. There's also 4 doors that lead to closets, and a smaller door you have to crouch down into to get into this little crawl space type closet. Neither my mom nor I really go down there at all. I caught through my peripheral vision. The little door to the crawlspace closet moved just a little bit. My heart literally dropped, but I approached it just a little bit. I stopped and now felt like my heart just completely stopped as well when an arm came out from the darkness of the little closet and pulled the door ever so lightly shut. I quietly but quickly went back up the stairs, wanting to run and be out of this house. I called 911 first thing and reported that there was a stranger in my house. Thank God I was quiet about leaving the basement and didn't give away the fact that I saw. The police showed up with their lights on, but not their sirens. All 4 of them came down to the basement with me, and they ordered the person in the closet out. The door slowly opened, and there was a bald, 50-something-year-old man with a nose too small for his squished-looking face. He had his hands up, and he was wearing one of my shirts. In fact, inside of the crawl-in closet were a number of my mom and I's belongings, mostly clothing. The whole closet smelled like piss, which begged the question how long he'd been there. Since there was no visible damage in the house other than piss stains, but several of our belongings were found in his possession, he was charged with 3rd-degree burglary. Somehow that's it. My mom and I obviously didn't want any of the clothes that gross creep wore back. I blame myself for most likely leaving the side door unlocked one night after taking out the trash. I learned my lesson. Lock the doors. The idea that someone could be in your house, even living in it at any moment because of an unlocked door, should not be taken lightly.